Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I was trying to see. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. There we go. Jesus the Lord. There we go. Shine on down on me, God. All right, so I'm going to get into, first off, I'm Coach Nye. I am the instructor and the host for this series that I've been doing, which is Women in Leadership, Women of the Bible that's in leadership, right? And I wanted to show you, it's not so much that they're in leadership, I just wanted to show you as women, leadership does not, what it does not look like. It does not always look like someone holding a mic or being in charge or being a manager or supervisor. That's not what it looked like all the time. And so I created this women's leadership course so you guys can see that it's totally different from what we think, right? Like with Ruth, we see that Ruth, her leadership trait was just her character, and that's what I want to teach women, how to stand up in their power and operate in their leadership, step into their leadership position, which is their purpose, and operate in their power. So that's what this whole course is about. Now, today is class 5, so if you missed any of the classes, you can check out my playlist, and it is under Coach Night Leadership Lounge. That's where they all are housed at. So today is class 5. We're going to talk about Martha and Mary, the leadership balance and priority. That's the main topic, just to show the leadership balance and what was a priority and how you can manage the both as a leader. But before I start, sorry, I'm going to recap. So in class 4, we studied Mary, the mother of Jesus. That's what we studied there. And the leadership lesson of surrender and obedience. That was the whole thing of with Mary, the mother of Jesus. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was just to show the difference of the obedience and how to surrender and when to surrender, right? So getting back into this, Mary teaches us that leadership begins with saying yes to God. That's all it. Because with her, Gabriel came to her and told her what you're going to carry the Son of Man. You're going to carry the Messiah, pretty much. And she was just like, okay. She didn't question. She didn't get into self and say, well, why me? Why I'm not sister such and such? They're more qualified to me. She didn't. She just surrendered and she obeyed. So that's what Mary taught us, that leadership begins with saying yes to God, even when the path is unclear. Now, her story shows that true leadership requires trust. That's what true leadership requires: trust, humility, and the willingness to carry responsibility with grace, even though she was up against everything. Because, as we talked about last week, she wasn't married, and now she's pregnant. You know what I mean? So she was up against being stoned. She was up against so much, but she knew, she had faith in God. She knew who He was. She understood where her purpose and power come from, and she knew that her mission and her thoughts or her personal feelings was way less than what God purpose is. So she just let that go. So the key focus of class 4 was to surrender, obedience, and trust God's plan. Uh-oh. Now, we're going to get into standing in power, leading with grace. So class 5 is about Martha and Mary, leadership, balance, and priority. I just did a recap of what class 4 was. Now we're going to get into it. So our opening psalm is going to be chapter 90, verse 12, which teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Okay, so the primary scripture for this is Luke chapter 10, 38 through 42, John 11, and John 12, verse 18. So let's get into the context of it, because as you know, I like to do the good and the bad, or the pros and cons of being a leader, in those times of whichever woman I'm talking about in the Bible. So today is Martha and Mary. So this lesson explores the tension many leaders face. A lot of us face between service and presence, and productivity and spiritual alignment. As a leader, your ways, right? Wherever you are, and your values and your morals, or whatever it is that you hold tight to you, sometimes can conflict where you work. Now, I was in the military, so a lot of spiritual or Christ-led leaders, soldiers, NCOs, or officers, that was the conflict with them of, letting that lead first, their values and morals lead first, and not interfere with the protocols, with the regulations, the SOPs, and different things that the Army said. So sometimes it can be a conflict, so you have to learn as a leader to balance the two. So two leadership styles that we're going to talk about today is service versus presence, okay? And then it highlights the burnout and the misalignment of the priorities. So the leadership skills, we're going to look at the good of it, right? Because they acted in their leadership skills, it was hospitality, devotion, and faith. That's what showed up. Hospitality, devotion, and faith. Now, the warning or the down part of it, if you want to look at it, is overworking leads to resentment, which was Martha. Martha was working. Busyness can replace intimacy. Mary was showing intimacy, and Martha was being overworked. Now, if she would have stayed in that, right? If she never would have went to Jesus and asked him, "Hey, can you tell Mary to help?" We're gonna get into it. She would have had this resentment, and it would have caused conflict. And I'm going to do a whole nother class on God's favorite place. The home and the favorite place, because He loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, right? So she would have resented, and she would have served maybe with an attitude. Everything she did, everything she would have done would have been from a place of resentment. Now, busyness can replace intimacy, but because she was so busy on what the world says she's supposed to be doing, and I'm going to talk about that, and Mary decided that no, I'm sitting right here. I am where I'm supposed to be. You cook. That's what you want to do. Go cook. Right? So let's get into it. Busyness can distract leaders from what matters most. What matters most? Leaders must balance action and stillness. So let's talk about it. One of the most relatable leadership moments in scripture appears in Luke chapter 10, 38 through 42, when Jesus visits the home of Martha and Mary. Now, Martha immediately begins preparing and serving, while Mary sits at Jesus' feet listening to his teaching. Martha knew what the job was to do. And especially having somebody like Jesus come to your home, oh no. So she went straight to work. And Mary, she loved the fact that Jesus is here and she can listen to him, because it's a spiritual connection that she's feeling, right? So Martha becomes frustrated and she asks Jesus, "Can you tell Mary to help her?" Right? Instead of agreeing with Martha, Jesus responds with gentle correction. This is what he said: "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the better part." Now, either she got it or she didn't get it. So to emphasize that prioritizing intimacy with him, listening to his word, and being present in his presence is more important than a frantic service and distractions. This is in Luke 10, 41 through 41 through 42. That's where you can find this when he tells Mary this, and well, he tells Martha this. But Mary chose where she wanted to be. She was excited to be where she wanted to be. And Jesus said, Mary has chosen the better part, because he know who he is. And anybody that can identify who he is on their own, that makes you closer to him. It's not someone had to force feed you. She understood the spirit. Now, this moment reveals a powerful leadership truth. And in that powerful leadership truth is busyness does not always equal effectiveness. So as a leader, a lot of leaders believe that the more busier they are, the more efficient they are. A lot of leaders believe that, and you hear a lot of business owners, they'll do what? They say, "Oh man, I've been working all night, man, nonstop, chasing the bag. I've just been putting in that work. And they believe that putting in the work is what's going to bring them the success. When God is giving you a thing of purpose, you don't have to work hard. You don't have to work hard at all. You're going to be successful just by showing up. And we're going to get more into it. So let's look at some different things with Martha. Martha's actions were not wrong. It wasn't. Serving as especially a respected leader, teacher, or rabbi, as they call him, like Jesus, no, that was culturally expected. Right? So Martha's desire to serve reflected dedication and responsibility. So she wasn't wrong. Her leadership style was right. Right? However, here's the problem. The problem was not the work itself. The issue was distraction and emotional agitation. As a leader, when we allow personal emotions, personal feelings to get in the way of the purpose, it can cause a distraction, right? She's looking at Mary as she's the distraction, but really it's her emotions and her personal feelings is what's causing the distraction. So the Greek word translated is as distracted, right? And it implies being pulled in multiple directions. Now, let's look at this. I'm gonna paint the picture. Let's look at it. She's in the kitchen. She's cooking. She's seen Jesus coming down the road. She's seen Jesus at the door. She's excited. She knew exactly what she was supposed to be doing because in those cultural times, women get in the kitchen. She immediately started whipping it up. Let her cook. She immediately started doing what she needed to do. Once she did that, now instead of her focusing on the bread or focusing on what it's supposed to be, she's focused too busy on why is Mary not in here with me? Why are you not in here with me? So that's how that went. But we're going to get more into that. So many leaders experience the same struggle even today. Responsibilities, deadlines, expectations, and obligations can create a constant state of activity, constantly. Over time, leaders may become so focused on a task that they lose connection with their purpose. As a leader, and this is what I always say, you cannot operate in your leadership position, which is your purpose, what God gave you. The job God gave you, your purpose. You can't operate in that fully by stepping into passion. Passion is about self. What do you want? What do I want? Purpose is about God. How can it affect others? That's how purpose works. So once, give you an example, and I probably get this example again. So while I'm working, whenever God give me a creative idea and I'm working on programs and I'm doing it, the moment that I start to get frustrated, that means that I have gotten out of alignment, because anything that God give you is not frustrating. It's just that you take your own way of thinking into it. So what I mean by that is I'm going to take the way the world taught me, survival mode, how to figure this thing out, and I'm going to go into it like that. And I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to take something that God gave me to do and put what the world, my mindset, right, that's been survival mode, and put my tweaks to it. So immediately, once I notice that, I step back. Once I'm frustrated, I step back and I say, okay, what am I doing? I'm operating in passion now. How it will work for me, how I see the world, not how God sees it. So that's how, as leaders, we have to focus on the task. They focused on the task, right? But however, you can become so focused that you lose sight of the task and you start operating in your own will. So Mary, on the other hand, she chose. Now, when I say chose, I'm highlighting this and I want you to understand. Listen, chose it implies a completed action of selection from multiple options. So she chose. That means it was multiple options that she could have been doing. There's other things she could have been in the kitchen. She could have been offering everybody drinks. She could have been doing so many other things. She could have been going to the well to get some water. She could have been doing a whole lot of things, but she chose to sit at Jesus' feet. Now that's a choice. Now most time with us, when we're operating in when we're God, I can't get that out. In the prophetic, right? In the prophetic, I think I got it out right. I wear aligners now, so I can't get certain words out. But when we're operating in what God told us to do and operating in our purpose, right? When we're operating in that, what do you still have choices. What do you choose to do? What do you choose to do? So I choose to what? I'm going to sit at Jesus' feet, right? That means I want to get closer to him. Sitting at Jesus' feet in those times meant a teacher. And when he's teaching, you sit, that's where the students sit, at the feet. But the problem was, it was only men. So, I'm going to put a pin in that and we're going to talk about it again. So in Jewish tradition, sitting at a rabbi's feet, right, was the posture of discipline. That means that I am a student. It bridges the gap between good intention and faithful, right? It implies managing emotions to choose responses rather than reacting impulsively. So she chose to sit at Jesus' feet. It symbolized learning, humility, and attentiveness. That's what it symbolized. By choosing this position, Mary prioritized what? Spiritual formation over immediate productivity. The immediate productivity was to get in the kitchen. She chose there. So you got Martha in the kitchen, you got Mary at the feet. So this teaches us that leadership must be grounded in connection with God before activity for God. Before you go serve, you have to be grounded in connection. That's basically what it's saying. So leaders often face pressures to constantly produce results. Leaders feel like I got to do this. What's the result? Sometimes the result is this. Sometimes the result is my evaluation got to be good. I want to make sure I look sharp and I'm saying the right things and I look important. I got to make sure that I stand out before everyone else. And that's a self thing, right? So that's what a lot of leaders, we go into it that way. So we leaders often face pressure to consistently produce results, meaning that this content that I'm creating or these programs that I'm creating, in my mind, it has to work, it has to work, it has to work, it has to work. But I don't have to stress myself because it is going to work, because it is God led. It was given to me by God. So now I know it's going to work. So, however, sustainable leadership requires moments of stillness, reflection, and spiritual renewal. So, as I told you guys, when you're sitting and you're doing a job and you're doing God's work and you're learning or you're teaching it, what happens is you have to learn to when to step back, when to do a self-reflection. Is this me? Especially if you're frustrated. If you're frustrated, you have to know when you're frustrated to be able to step back. Anytime you're doing God's work and you're frustrated, just know that you're operating in your own will. You're operating in self. That's what that means. Okay? So, without these moments, leaders can experience, as we talked about, burnout, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. Now, Mary Choice reminds us that most effective leaders regularly pause. We pause to realign, as I just said. Once I notice that, I'm getting frustrated, I have to realign. And I have to ask myself, am I operating in my own purpose? Or, in my passion, or am I operating from purpose? I'm passionate about helping people, but am I doing it from a place of purpose? So you have to realign with your source and wisdom, with God and wisdom. So I'm going to ask you, have you ever been so busy doing things that you lost sight of the why you were doing them? The why. And I have a friend that he always reach out and he always say, remember the why, remember the why, remember the why. Because sometimes, even when creating content and you can have social media, what happens is you'll get caught up with the trend, trying to get the most followers of why no one's watching your video, why is this? But the whole purpose of the why was to help others. That's what the purpose of the why is. So, as I said, my problem was that I would allow being busy to cause me to focus solely on work and my own creativity. God will give me an idea, He'll give me what I need, and I would be so focused, right? And then all of a sudden now this turns into this, when you're starting to work, it turns into a rabbit hole because now, oh, I can add this, and oh, I can add that, and oh, I can add that, and now I'm out of alignment because I'm operating from my own creative thoughts and to lead my work. That's what's happening, which would cause me to get out of alignment. And then, and that's where the frustration would come. But I'm no longer frustrated because I understand when that happens, I have to step back. Okay, God, what is it that I need to be doing in this moment? What am I not doing in this moment, or what I should be doing in this moment? So let's get into number 2. Presence with God strengthens leadership wisdom. Presence fuels sustainable leadership. Presence fuels sustainable leadership. So Mary's posture at the feet of Jesus revealed another important principle, which was wisdom grows through presence. That's what that means. When Mary sat and listened to Jesus, she was not avoiding responsibility. She was investing in something deeper, and that was understanding. And tomorrow's the Power Within Leadership course, tomorrow we're going to talk about listening to understand. So leaders' decisions require discernment, emotional intelligence, and spiritual insight. These qualities develop through time spent learning, reflecting, and connecting with God. That's how that goes, okay? So throughout the scripture, we see leaders who prioritize time with God before taking action. We even talk about that in the book of Daniel, how Daniel, before he interceded or before he interpreted the dream, he went to God first. He said, "Hold on, give me till tomorrow. Let me go pray about it." And that's the thing. A lot of us just feel like God will tell you to open a business and you immediately open a business. I'm speaking for myself. God told me to open my business. I opened up the fitness business because I'm a personal trainer. Why not? He hadn't gave me the rest of the instructions. So for that whole year, I was frustrated of why it wasn't moving and why I wasn't doing a thing. And I'm like, well, God, you told me to do it. I know I trusted. I talked to you. You showed me I was doing the right thing. But why it's not moving? Because I never heard the rest of it. It was supposed to be the trinity of fitness, meaning that spiritual, mental, and physical teach you how to heal whole body. So I had to restart the business, right? Rebuild it. So as we talked about, yeah, wisdom grows through presence. So when Mary sat and listened to Jesus, she was not avoiding responsibility, not at all. She was investing in something deeper, which was, we talked about, was understanding. And so leadership decisions require discernment, as we talked about, emotional intelligence and spiritual insight. These qualities develop through time spent learning, reflecting, and connecting with God. Throughout Scripture, we see leaders who prioritize time with God before taking action. Now, Moses regularly withdrew. Moses was always withdrawn from the people to go and seek God's face, right? Before leading the Israelites, he went to God. He always had to go back to the mountain, have a conversation with God. But Jesus himself often retreated. He retreated to quiet places to pray. That's just what it is. You have to disconnect from the world, meaning that everything that's going on, work, of the expectations of yourself that people put on you, the negative self-talk, you have to disconnect from survival mode to get a full understanding of what it is that God needs from you. So these moments of spiritual connections provide clarity and direction. So Mary demonstrated that effective leadership began with attentiveness and learning. That's what she demonstrates. This moment also highlights the courage Mary showed by stepping up, right? She was stepping into the learning. That's what it showed. It showed her stepping into a learning role that was traditionally reserved for men in that culture. Now, this is the catch to that. So sitting at the rabbi's feet was typically associated with male discipleship. Male discipleship. Now the cat is out the bag. The secret is out the bag. Now we understand totally. See, it was one thing when we read the Bible and we read it plain. Martha was in the kitchen. Mary was at Jesus' feet. We seen that it seemed like, Martha, why you being a hater? She's at the feet. It was none of that. It was in their culture that they are in the kitchen. Women supposed to be in the kitchen. So it wasn't the fact that she was getting favored with God or being intimate or sitting there listening and learning with God. It wasn't that. It was the fact that she knew, hold on, that she knew where they were supposed to be. It's just an automatic thing. It's no, back in those times, that's what it was supposed to be. So they had a routine. Let's think about it. They had a routine. So while I do the yeast, you do this. And that's how they serve the people quickly. But because you're not in there, it wasn't because she was sitting at his feet and she wanted to do what she wanted to do. It's Martha is going off of what is the norm. But I'm trying to tell you what's the norm of the physical world has nothing to do with the spiritual world. What Mary was doing was having a conversation. She was spiritually connected with Jesus and she was sitting listening to his teaching, but she wasn't supposed to be there. Women were not supposed to be in the room with the teaching. They were supposed to be in the kitchen. That is the overall point of the Martha Mary issue. So that women in the kitchen. So because that was custom, it seemed to Martha that she was not doing her job. That was her job. Like, what is you doing? Can you imagine being in those times? You cooking and your sister sitting in the living room where the men's supposed to be listening to the teacher? Kick back, laying at his feet like, teach me more. And you like, girl, if you don't get your up in here, we ain't supposed to be in there. But that's why I say the physical rules do not apply to the spiritual rules. So she was too busy in men business. That's what Martha was thinking about. You over here in the men's business and the women's business need to be tended to. So and it had nothing to do. So that whole thing with Martha and Mary had nothing to do with the roles, the ROLL, nothing to do with the role. It has everything to do with the role, ROLE, meaning that Mary, you're supposed to be in the kitchen because that's what the custom said, the physical world. That's what the issue was. Yet Jesus affirms Mary's choice. He's demonstrating that spiritual growth and leadership preparation are open to all who seek wisdom. So he didn't have anything to do. I understand it's the custom in the physical world of this is what they said. You can't sit here. That has nothing to do with the spiritual law. All are open to wisdom. So Psalms 46:10 states, "Be still and know that I am your God." Be still and know that I am your God. Stillness is not passivity. No, it's not. So when stillness come, a lot of people feel like, a lot of people feel, how I was talking to someone and they're like, I just can't sit still that long. Well, why you can't sit still that long? And especially when you get in a service that's for you. Why you can't sit still to receive what's yours? So it is a posture of awareness and attentiveness. That's what stillness is. So leaders who cultivate stillness are able to listen more deeply, think more clearly, and respond more wisely. And Mary's example reminds us that leadership wisdom grows in quiet spaces. So she said, and we talked about it, a choice. A choice means there are multiple options, but she chose to be there. And spiritually, Martha chose to be in the kitchen, physically, of the physical world, by the physical laws. But the spiritual realm, the spiritual laws, they chose, but both of them were still in their leadership position. It didn't take away from their leadership position. So modern leaders often struggle to create space for reflection. Yeah. And that reflection is for yourself. Self-reflection. For you to be able to sit back and see what went wrong with you. Give me 1 second. Sorry. For you to do a self-reflection of self, to see where is it that I need to do better? Where is it that I'm doing too much? Where is it that I need more guidance? Where to be honest with yourself. So you have to. So technology, communication, all that demand and constant activity can make silence feel uncomfortable. I always say peace. A person that don't know peace, they call it boredom. They say, I'm bored. I'm bored. Because you don't know what peace is. And so they have to always have something exciting going on. So, however, leaders who intentionally build time for reflection and prayer often develop greater clarity and emotional balance. Spending time listening to God strengthens leaders' ability to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. So instead of reacting, you're responding. That's the toxic way is reacting. The healthy way and the healed version is always to respond. And it's not to pop off. It's not to pop off. It's just to respond from a healthier mindset. You have to change the way you think. So, what practices help you slow down enough to hear God clearly? Ask yourself that. What practices help you slow down enough to hear God clearly? So, what practices do you use? And that's something that you can think about later. You can meditate on it. What practices help you slow down enough to hear God clearly? Now, mine's is cues. I have my cues. I just know when God is nudging me. It's no more of I learned to regulate my nervous system. So instead of my nervous system being set to the physical toxic survival mode, right? That you get butterflies in your stomach. That mean go hide. Something bad is going to happen. No, I understand that my nervous system is my discernment, and that's how He speaks to me. So healthy leaders learn to balance service and spiritual alignment. So the story of Martha and Mary is not meant to portray one sister as completely right and the other one as completely wrong. That's not what it was at all. As we talked about, the whole purpose of it is Martha was expecting Mary to be in the role that the custom says she needed to be in. But Mary chose to be in the role that was going to bring her in a better connection with spirit, which is Jesus, which is God, spiritually. So instead, it highlights the importance of balance in leadership. And so service is essential. Communities and organizations depend on people who are willing to take action and meet practical needs. Yes, so Martha's willingness to serve reflects dedication and responsibility. So let's look at it in the physical. Yes, she's so responsible. Martha knew that Jesus was coming. He's a guest. things had to be done. She didn't second guess. She didn't do the whole, well, I didn't get this ready. I don't have this ready. No, she immediately went into action. She went in there and started whipping up the rolls. ROLLS, whipping up the rolls. Mary, on the other hand, was like, okay, Jesus is here. I want to learn something. So she switched her role, ROLE, to sit and learn. That's what she wanted to do. So when services become disconnected from spiritual alignment, it can lead to frustration and resentment. The same way how Martha resented, well, she was upset. She was frustrated because she didn't have any help. So when you serve God, that requires, if anything, as I say, if it requires any frustration, that means that you're operating from purpose, self. Anything that God give you, it's not frustrated. It's when we put our own thoughts to it, right? Of the survival mode, what we live in the physical world. When God give us an assignment and we look at it like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to take the shortcut because I know how to get to, you want me to be at this address at this time, I'm going to take the shortcut. But God is making you go the long route for a reason. But when you take the shortcut, everything goes wrong. Listen to God. There's no frustration. So the next time you feel frustrated doing something, take a step back. God, what is it that you need of me in this moment? What do I need to do in this moment? Or what am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? And then wait for his response. So Martha's frustration eventually becomes directed towards who? Now misplaced anger, frustration, because it went straight to her sister and Jesus. Because she's frustrated, but she's talking to Jesus, right? She asked Jesus to correct Mary. She's like, hey, tell her she needs to help. Tell her she needs to help. Now that revealed her stress and affected her relationship, right? It could have. It could have affected her relationship with her sister, with Jesus, with everyone in the room. But it didn't, because Jesus represents what a true leader is. And because she was operating from a place of what the world said, that women need to be in the kitchen, and her sister wasn't in the kitchen, she took that frustration out on the sister, and she came to Jesus with it. So this is a common experience for leaders who carry too many responsibilities without replenishing their spiritual and their emotional energy. That's what will happen. Okay? So healthy leadership requires a balance between doing and being. So let me give you a couple. Mary represents the posture of listening and learning. Martha represents the posture of serving and acting. Both are necessary for effective leadership. Both of them. The challenge is learning when to shift between the two. Now, as a leader, you know how to listen, right? And you're learning. And then to serve and act. When do I need to serve? When do I need to just listen? Sometimes God will come to you with something. When do you need to operate, or when do you need to execute, or just listen to him? A lot of times God bring us something and we just need to listen first. Listen. And then we execute. We have to process what it is. So Jesus corrected Martha. Him correcting her, it wasn't a harsh thing. It wasn't him getting on to her, as they say in the military, dragging him or whatever. But he addressed her twice. Martha, Martha. Martha, Martha. It was the reason why he said Martha, Martha. He expressed his care while guiding her towards a healthier perspective. Jesus is portraying the character of a true leader. Gentle guidance, gentle teaching, right? He taught her gently, and he led with a gentle spirit. Okay? So let's get into... Okay, so with him doing that, that demonstrated that God's guidance often comes as gentle correction. So leaders who focus only on action may experience a burnout, and leaders who focus only on reflection may struggle to implement ideas. So balanced leadership requires both time with God, meaningful actions, thoughtful reflections, and practical service. The healthiest leaders cultivate rhythm that include both work and renewal. Now, these are the questions that I want you to ask yourself. This is something that I want you to ask yourself. In your current season of life, do you identify more with Martha or Mary? Now, for me, I'm Martha when I get so focused on a project that I am creating in my business. When I get so focused on that project that I'm creating in my business, but then I have to take a break and step back And that's when I step into Mary, meaning I have to go back, you know, and have that intimate, get back into my innate nature, right? Which is who I'm truly, who God called me to be. And ask myself, am I in alignment? I couldn't get that out. I'm sorry. Am I in alignment? So now we're going to do a recap of everything we just learned. So Martha and Mary teach us that leadership requires both service and spiritual alignment. Busyness alone cannot sustain a leader. Wisdom grows when we slow down enough to listen to God. As we move into the ARPA reflection, I want you to consider how balance, presence, and priorities are shaping your leadership. So, Jesus affirms presence. That's the listening posture. Over performance, redefining leadership productivity. Now let's get into the RPI. So acknowledge burnout presence, acknowledgement. What are your burnout patterns? And then release performance mentality. Release it. Release what the world said you have to, or how you have to do it, or you have to study for 3 hours, you have to study for 4 hours. No, release that. I want you to practice. I want you to practice resting and being present. Okay? And inner explore what drives my busyness. That's what you want to self-reflect on. What drives your busyness? And then empowerment. I choose wisdom over rush. And repeat after me. I lead from presence, not pressure. I lead from presence, not pressure. What you prioritize shapes how you lead. So just remember, busyness will keep you in passion, not in purpose. Purpose is of God. Listen, I thank you guys for joining. This live will be housed in the playlist, Coach Night Leadership Lounge.